Hey everybody, it's Dana Niblett. I wanted to hop on really quick and do a quick tutorial over how to set up for the case of Hester Higginbotham. I really like this activity because it does take some time the first time you do it, but once you've done it, you can use it for years and years and years with little to no setup. So here we go. So you're going to start by opening up the zip file, and you'll see all of the files within the zip file, and you're going to start by clicking on the lesson plan, and of course you'll scroll through all of this, and I have step-by-step instructions for setting up the lab. So it tells you to start by printing the hall passes. And so you can find the hall passes here. They're labeled as forensic hall passes. So you'll want to print one of these for each lab group that you have. And you can see they're editable so that you can customize them to fit your needs for your school. And then what you're going to do is you're going to also print the chain of custody logs, which are included in the file. So here you can see chain of custody log printable. You'll just print those out, and you'll need one of those. Actually, you'll need 7 of those for each lab group that you have. And then it tells you to gather all of these materials. Now, there are 2 parts to this activity. There's part A and part B, and I highly recommend dividing this into 2 days. So typically what I do, even in my block classes, is day 1 is for part A, and then day 2 is for part B on the student answer sheet. But what I do, some of these things are for day 1, some of these things are for day 2. I go ahead and I compile all of those things into like a crime scene kit. You can see here in the picture, I dump all of this stuff in like these little baskets that I got from the Dollar Tree, and everything's ready to go. And I just tell my students, you're not going to use everything in your crime scene kit on day 1. Some things will be used on day 2. But gather these things, compile like a little kit, or either just lay it all out on your lab stations. I typically have 7 lab groups, so I make 7 of these kits, which is a little time consuming at the beginning, but once you do it once, you can just save it from year to year, and it's really just grab and go from there. So once you've gathered all your lab supplies, it's time to create the comparison evidence. So if you've taken the time to read the case, you know we have a victim, Mr. Higginbotham, and he is found dead in the dumpsters. And investigators don't believe that that was the primary crime scene. That's just the dumping ground. And so it's the job of your students to figure out where the primary crime scene is, and it's going to be in one of 7 locations within your school. So you're going to send your students out to 7 locations within your school to collect evidence, and they're going to compare that evidence to this sock evidence that you're about to create. So what I do is I just collect 7 socks. You can see here I've raided my kids' sock drawer. I found socks that didn't have matches anymore, confiscated them, and I'm using these as evidence. So I have 7 of those, 1 for each lab group, and I always use the front parking lot of my school as my primary crime scene. So what I do is I head out to the front parking lot of the school. I take my sock or socks and I rub them in the ground. And the goal here is to just pick up all kinds of debris. So I pick up gravel, sand, dirt. You can see here in the picture some grass, and then I take that and I put it in a Ziploc bag and I label it for each lab group. And on day 2, my students are going to ask for Mr. Higginbotham's sock evidence, and I'm going to provide this to them. So you actually do this, and then you hang on to it until your students ask for it in day 2 of the investigation. So once you have everything set up, then you are ready to edit the student answer sheet. So in the zip file, you'll find the case of Hester Higginbotham, and you'll pull up the editable worksheet. And so you'll want to customize this to fit your classroom needs. So what we have here is, it says the scenario: the body of Hester Higginbotham was found in the dumpsters. You'll enter a road name for your town. I just do a popular road name that most students are familiar with. And then I put our city and county name here, our school name here. And then here's where you're going to list the 7 locations within your school that you want your students to travel. So I always send my students to our library, and then we have a playground for little kids, so I send them out to the playground. We have a butterfly garden, so I send them out there. I send them to another teacher's classroom, our principal's office, our lunchroom, and we have like a rotunda in the middle of the school. I send them there as well. Oh, and the gym. I send them to the gym too. So I just enter those locations so that the students know exactly where they're supposed to go when they're out and about collecting evidence. So at this point, you're just going to edit and save your work and print these out. And I usually print out one for each lab group. All right, just a quick tip. When I have my students head out to these locations, let's say location 1 is the gym, location 2 is the library. So I'll start with group 1 and I'll say, group 1, you're going to start here in this location, and then you're going to travel in order. And then I'm going to have group 2 start in this location, and then they're going to travel in order. Group 7 will start in this location, and then their next location will be here. This ensures that you have one group at each location at any given time, and you don't have an entire class in one spot at one time. So everybody is kind of rotating in a rotation where you only have 4 to 5 students in a location at a time, and it makes the management of this activity much, much easier. So day 1 begins with the evidence collection lesson. It's just a short mini lesson that gets the kids sort of prepped and lets them know what you expect them to do. So go through and show students each slide of the slideshow or the PowerPoint presentation, because it shows them the chain of custody log that they'll be working with for the activity, and exactly what they're doing on day 1 and day 2 of the investigation. And so task number 1 at the end of the slideshow says to read the lab investigation worksheet that you have edited for them, and to make sure that they have all the materials ready to go, which you have provided for them. And then it says, ask your teacher which location you should visit first. So if you're having lab group 1 start at the library, and lab group 2 start at the teacher's lounge, and lab group 3 start in the principal's office, then you will give those instructions at the beginning of day 1. So once they have those instructions and they've read over their lab sheet, then they'll just go and travel to different locations in the school. And what they're doing at each location is they're trying to get evidence that they're then going to bring back and compare with the evidence found on Mr. Higginbotham's sock. And they're going to see which location they believe is the primary crime scene based on that investigation. So you can see here my students are in the library, and they're just taking their clear tape and they're just kind of daubing the ground to see what kind of debris they can pick up from this location. And then what they'll do is they'll pick up that debris, whatever they can get, on that piece of tape, and they'll put it on a white index card so that they can view it pretty easily. And then their job is to follow the chain of custody as if they were picking up evidence from a crime scene. And And so they'll bag it, they'll seal it, they'll sign it according to chain of custody rules. They'll fill out the chain of custody log and they'll staple it to their Ziploc bag. And then they're finished. They're done at this location and they can move on to their next location. And then once they're at their second location, they'll do the same thing. They'll just kind of daub the ground with clear plastic tape. They'll pick up any debris they can. They'll put it on a white index card, fill out the chain of custody log, bag it, seal it, and then once they've traveled to all 7 locations, they'll bring all 7 of their evidence cards back to the classroom and lay them out and get ready for day 2. So in day 2, students are going to take the location evidence that they collected from their 7 possible crime scene locations the day before, and they're just going to take turns dumping that evidence out on these little cards that I've provided. So let's say they want to look at the evidence they collected from the library first. They'll take out that library debris that they collected from the floor and they'll put it on their location evidence card. And then they're going to take the evidence from Hester Higginbotham's sock that you will provide them in day 2, and they'll put that on their crime scene evidence card. And so what they'll do is they'll use a microscope or a magnifying glass and forceps to kind of go back and forth and compare the evidence. And if they decide, well, the library evidence doesn't really match up to the evidence found on the sock, then they can disregard that as the primary crime scene. Let's say they want to look at the gym evidence next, the evidence they found from the gym floor. Then they'll take that out, they'll compare it to Hester Higginbotham's sock, and if they think that a lot of the debris match up, then they can name that as a possible primary crime scene. So basically what they're doing is they're going through each of the 7 location evidences and they're comparing it to the evidence found on Hester Higginbotham's sock, and hopefully they'll be able to come up with the primary crime